Hi, Tom Trento, TrentoVision.TV, here on a beautiful Wednesday, the 24th of April in South Florida. We're broadcasting on WNN 1470 out of Boca Raton, Florida. 50,000 horsepower going from Miami to Orlando. We're covering about 5 million people, and I think they're all listening right now. But if you're watching on TrentoVision.TV. And if you're really slick with this technology, you could be listening on your iPhone on iHeartRadio. We recommend everybody download the application iHeartRadio. Once you do that, go to WNN in South Florida. You get perfect digital audio to listen to this show every day, 5 to 6 weekdays. And we want you to listen in the morning, 6 to 9, to Brian Craig and Steve Kane. They start the day in South Florida. They deconstruct the Obama administration and some of the failures there, as we do from a national security perspective here on TrentoVision. As you know, we do all things national security. In particular, we deal with the Muslim Brotherhood, their infiltration into the United States, their global and plan for the United States, and indeed their infiltration in this administration. And that has some serious consequences, folks. But here on TrentoVision, broadcasting on WNN 1470, we expose all that nonsense. We do the investigations necessary to let you know exactly what's going on. And today, we're continuing with part 3 of our 5-part special investigative expose on an organization that, you know, maybe not everybody is. Hi, CJ. How are you?
Great.
CJ just slid in, and here she is. Say hello to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
I'm telling everybody about our special, Southern Filthy Rich
Law Center.
When you got a quarter on Monday's special, President of Family Research Council Tony Perkins told us that Southern Poverty Law Center has about $250 million on hand.
Yeah.
What would you do with $250 million?
I don't know. You keep asking
me that.
I know.
It's
you keep
like
asking
winning
me that, but you don't give me any time off work to think about it.
I know. It's like winning the Powerball. Well, when you have that much cash and you are so ideologically driven as the SPLC is,
yes,
then you develop this sort of immunity to anything that's out there, to any opposition. And in fact, what we have found in our special investigation is you develop an attitude of a capability to crush people. And we found in this investigation of the Southern Poverty Law Center, the way they try to crush people, hurt people who don't follow their hardcore leftist ideology, is by creating this industry of hate and looking at a group, labeling them hate with no criteria, no fundamental template to understand that.
Exactly.
De facto, because they have been doing it for 30, 40 years. And then once they classify an organization as hate, then they start their revenue machine raising
That's
money.
Right. That's where the fundraising comes
through donations or through litigation.
Yeah.
You know, and if they become a defendant, you know, they'll countersue. And I mean, this is why we have to expose all of this. On Monday, we hit head on the overview. Tony Perkins, president of Family Research Council, gave us the overview of Southern Poverty Law Center, and had a frightening, a horrendous story of how this organization, SPLC, identified Family Research Council as a hate group. I know Family Research Council personally for over 30 years. I knew when they got started. I've been friends with them for many, many years. And they are primarily a conservative, very Christian-oriented, evangelical, conservative Catholics involved, moral. They deal with the social issues. And if you ever, walked in the halls and spoke to the people, they're some of the most loving people on the face of the earth.
They're conservative, traditional, Christian American values. There's no problem with this organization.
Well, and then, if you take a principled position against something that the SPLC disagrees with, in this case it was the homosexual issue, and the Judeo-Christian scriptures say that homosexuality is an offense to God, all of that. If you take that position, you're then declared a hate group, as Family Research Council was.
So I guess the Pope is too, right?
Well, yeah, of course. And then it goes beyond that, though. Then they do this sort of synopsis of you as an individual, then your organization, as they did to Tony Perkins.
Right.
Then they place you on their hate map.
Yep.
They give the exact geospatial location.
How to find them.
How to find them. And in August of last year, 2012, one Floyd Lee Corkins, upset over a social controversy over Chick-fil-A's position against gay marriage and Family Research Council's position against gay marriage. He decided to take matters into his own hands, and we heard this from Tony on Monday and from Peter Sprigg yesterday.
Yes.
In our second part. And Floyd Lee Corkins went and bought a pistol, 9mm, and bullets, did a little training, and then he bought 15 Chick-fil-A sandwiches. And he looked on the hate map on Southern Poverty Law Center as detailed in the legal documents. And he read the material there. He got his motivation from what SPLC wrote about Family Research Council being a hate organization. He got his directions from their hate map, and he implemented his diabolical plan.
Right.
Went in, and but for the bravery of the building manager, Leo Johnson, who is now handicapped and deformed his left arm for the rest of his life, Floyd Lee Corkins would have possibly carried out his goal of killing 15 employees of Family Research Council, and then rubbing the Chick-fil-A sandwich in their face as a symbolic stand against a pro-family, pro-life, pro-American organization.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that,
Sure.
The Family Research Council is on this hate group list, with the Ku Klux Klan. So just in case people aren't familiar with it and they think, oh, well, maybe we should have a hate list. Well, you should. The Klan is definitely a hate group.
You would think, yeah,
okay.
Sure.
The Family Research Council is not. And another point I want to make for people who maybe haven't watched the first couple of shows is that there's a link between the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Obama administration, and they are advising the Obama administration. The Justice Department, the U.S. Army, has cribbed the SPLC's hate group list and put it on their own watch lists.
That's crazy.
So if you have the guts to actually speak up for your convictions in this country and the SPLC doesn't like what you have to say, then they're going to put you on their list. They're going to raise money so people can come after you, and they're going to advise the federal government that you should be watched by the government. And the government will.
Well, I think we need an expose. If you could read the wall right here, Southern Poverty Law Center exposed, on TrentoVision and our sister organization, The United West, which is also a
hate group.
We made the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list. Ours is not in taking a stand on traditional family issues. Ours was taking an oppositional position to Islamic jihad.
Yes.
We think it's...
Imagine that.
Yeah,
we want to protect Christians, Jews, Hindus, Western
Westerners,
civilization.
So we got listed there, and
we should send out a fundraising letter and say, "Hey, we made the SPLC
I think
hate crimes group
whatever
list.
it is.
Yeah, send us $10 so we could sue them."
We will do that. But in a couple of months ago, a group of us got together and said, you know what, we've got to alert the American public to this organization. It's really a bogus front group. It's a political
shakedown
arm.
racket.
It is a shakedown racket. And a group has been getting somewhat organized, and we decided to have this week to expose the Southern Poverty Law Center because up until a day or so ago, this coming Monday, the 29th, was going to be the sentencing of Floyd Lee Corkins. He's looking at a lot of time. He did plead guilty to 3 charges, and we'll hear from our special guests in a moment about that. but most likely because of the Boston bombings. The defense wanted to put some space between sentencing on terrorist charges and the Boston bombing. So Floyd Lee Corken's sentencing has been delayed till June, but our expose has not been delayed. And in fact, the sooner we show these people who, show to America who these folks are. Hey, Damon, have you heard back from SPLC yet?
No.
Not yet. Okay. We have a call into them, CJ. In fairness to them, I want to get, Mark Potok or Mars Dees or any of their flunkies, get them on the show. We'll let them, have a shot to defend themselves. My guess is we're not going to hear from them, but, maybe they got the...
You were there when I left them a message yesterday.
Yeah, no, we haven't heard back yet, but we're going to pursue them, and maybe next week, live on the air, we'll place a couple of calls to those folks.
Yeah, and we can
See
do
if
a
they
follow-up in June,
We can
too,
do that, yeah.
before the sentencing.
Now, today's show, let me introduce the show by showing you, all these shows, a pretty neat little item here. Don't come here yet, Mike. Okay, come to my screen, please, Mike. This is the email we sent out today introducing the topic of today's shows and our speakers, our special guests. And if you're watching right now on TrentoVision.tv, you see on your screen an email that says Wednesday, Part 3, Southern Poverty Law Center exposed on TrentoVision. And the headline for today's segment, Southern Poverty Law Center, in quotes, aids and abets Muslim jihadis. We have a picture of Mark Potok speaking the other day about the Boston attack and putting out a supposition that it was right-wing fundamentalists. That's their favorite thing.
Right.
And then right now on the screen you see our one of our special guests for today. I'll introduce him in a second.
That's a good picture.
Good picture. I think he was a few pounds lighter then, maybe. Who knows?
Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know. We all. I'm glad that this table we're at comes a little above there. All right, now we're asking a few questions. How can an organization like the Southern Poverty Law Center have poverty in its name when it's really filthy rich? Why does the SPLC provide political cover for radical Muslim organizations and fight against pro-American organizations that fight the radical Muslim groups? All right, with that, why don't we bring on our very good friend, General Jerry Boykin, and with him is another good friend of ours, David Reaboi. Jerry Boykin is with Family Research Council, Executive Vice President. Dave Reaboi is with that rock-solid national security think tank, Center for Security Policy. Gentlemen, how you doing?
Hello.
Good to be with you.
All right, good to have.
Look how dressed up they are. They're so Washington, aren't they?
Oh man, you guys are so Washington. Ties, shirts. Hey, General, you don't have a napkin in your breast pocket like Dave does.
Dave is younger than me and is certainly a lot more debonair than I am.
Oh, is that what it is? Well, let me ask you this, General.
For other things, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, just by way of introducing you to our audience. You're fairly well known around the United States. You're a very controversial figure, but you remember the operation called Operation Gothic Serpent? Back in August through October of 1993. From what we understand and what history records, you were part of that.
I was a commander of the Delta Force during the events that have now come to be known as Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, that was the part of the civil war in Somalia, and you were commanding Delta Force. You went into Delta Force actually earlier in the late 70s, and if I'm not mistaken, you were also part of Operation Eagle Claw, correct?
That's correct. That was the attempted rescue of 52 Americans in Tehran in April of 1980.
And a particular country captured in their coup, their revolution. A particular country captured our embassy workers and held them for 444 days. And Operation Eagle Claw was designed, one of Delta's first missions, to go rescue the hostages. And a very unfortunate set of circumstances occurred. Eight very brave people. I mean, historians say this was a suicide mission in many respects. And all the volunteers were going to do whatever they could to get the Americans out. You were part of that, and now annually the survivors meet and have a memorial service at Arlington, correct?
That's correct. Yes, we do. We do have get-togethers with not only the rescue force, but with the hostages as well.
Yeah. Well, today we're discussing the role of Southern Poverty Law Center with the support of Islamic jihadis. But history records that back in the late 70s, early 80s, you had your initial confrontations on a kinetic or military level with Ayatollah Khomeini, a Shia Muslim out of Iran. And then a few years later in Operation Gothic Serpent, Black Hawk Down, you were fighting Mohammed Adid, another Islamic warrior, correct?
That's correct.
So you've been at this battle on the military side of Islamic Jihad for a lot of years. You're still in it, but the guns have been put down. And what is the fight like right now? Explain this clash between Islamic Jihad and American democracy right now, if you could, for everyone.
Well, from my perspective, the threat that is presented by Islamic Jihad inside the United States today is one that is A, not understood by the American public, B, not accepted by the administration nor the executive branch departments, and finally, a very, very dangerous threat to the future of this nation. And as Sun Tzu said, know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear 100 battles. Well, we're on the losing side because we haven't paid enough attention to Sun Tzu, because we don't understand what we're up against with the elements of the Muslim Brotherhood in America today. They are real, they are an existential threat, and they are growing in strength. And the guy sitting to my left here is a real authority on that.
Yeah, Dave Reaboi with Center for Security Policy. You were involved in a project that the general was involved in, and full disclosure, I was involved in the compilation of what I like to refer to as the Bible on Sharia, the understanding of the threat of Sharia, the threat to America. Tell us your involvement at Center for Security Policy with putting Sharia, the threat, together, and expand a little bit on the general's proposition that the Muslim Brotherhood is the operational agents of Islamic Jihad on the cultural end of civilization right now.
Sure, thank you. I'm also very honored to be sitting next to the general, who is without a doubt one of America's great heroes. And we were very glad to have the general and you, Tom, and many others as part of the Center for Security Policy's project, which was called Team B2, which pulled together 19 top national security professionals in a variety of disciplines to try to understand what the threat is, and we'll say the pulling back a little from what we would consider to be the kinetic terrorist threat, but the global jihadist threat from an ideological perspective, because we found that neither the public nor the media nor the government really understood what were the animating factors behind this war being waged against us. We're at a time in 2013 right now where we can't even, I mean, we talk about Sun Tzu and knowing the enemy. We can't even acknowledge in public that we even have an enemy. and we're very, very far behind the 8 ball. But anyway, so we put this book together in September 2010, and it's gotten a lot of traction, thankfully, and even apologists and radical leftists like the Center for American Progress called this report the fullest articulation of the Sharia threat argument, and I think that's true. It should also be noted that in the last 2.5 years or so, there has not been one article or one piece or a comment that has alleged we've taken anything out of context in terms of Islamic scripture and doctrine. And I think that's important to note, especially when people like the Southern Poverty Law Center or Think Progress or Media Matters, I mean, you name it, the whole laundry list. When they'll come after us as being quote unquote haters, but no one will ever touch the subject matter because
that is a critical point, Dave, and that's why I wanted to lay this groundwork right now. That with the two of you there, we have an individual who has been part of history fighting an ideology that has a global conquest. He's been fighting it for 30, 40 years almost. And the ideology, Islamic jihad, and this administration can't even say those words, is 1,400 years old, and the United States and Israel are two targets. And with your involvement, one of the top think tanks on national security, I want to establish for our viewers and listeners that we don't have a vendetta against the Southern Poverty Law Center. We're not angry that they listed us as a hate group. That's their, they can do that all day long. We want the world and the country to know that there are substantive, philosophical, theological, political issues that need to be debated, discussed, and when you take a position against Islamic jihad, doesn't mean you hate Muslims. We don't.
Exactly.
No one I know hates Muslims. We're fighting an ideology.
Yeah.
So as an outset to all of that, General, how have you found in your daily work the distinction, particularly at Family Research Council? You got like 2 black marks. You're a pro-family organization, but you're known for also fighting Islamic jihad. How do you reconcile people thinking you may hate Muslims when you fight an ideology?
Well, let me say this, Tom, and I'm glad you asked that question. Rarely will you find on Right Wing Watch or YouTube the entirety of my presentations. You don't see that what I actually say to people is most Muslims in America reject Sharia or Islamic law. Most Muslims in America don't want to be involved in this violent jihad. And that what we as Americans should be doing is reaching out to them and trying to make them part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And they have been relatively silent. They have been unable to speak out because the only voice for Muslims in America today are the extremists. And on those rare occasions when you find a very brave Muslim like Zuhdi Jasser in Phoenix, who is willing to speak out against the Muslim Brotherhood and its goal of implementing Sharia in America, they are threatened, they are vilified, they're even run out of their own mosque, and they are castigated by the Muslim Brotherhood voices. So what I've actually said is, I don't hate Muslims. I would like to bring Muslims into being part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Dave. Did you have something you wanted to add, Dave?
And we are having a little audio trouble, aren't we? No, we're okay.
I would agree strongly with what the general said. I think groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center actually, now we'll really get to the topic in earnest. I mean, this is how they help the so-called extremist jihadist element, is they completely wipe out the possibility of internal criticism of Islam. from people like Zuhdi Jasser, from people who reject what is readily accessible mainstream Sharia doctrine in most of the world. And I like to cite this as an example. After 9/11, it was totally commonplace to turn on your TV and to hear commentators and see in print commentators saying that yes, there is a problem within an element of Islam that needs to embrace modernity. It needs to be reformed. It's a problem that Muslims as a group need to deal with and need to deal with internally. Well, today, this year, you can't say that without being called an Islamophobe, a hater, and on and on. I think that it's completely, and I think that idea is completely reasonable. And what groups like SPLC have done is anyone who touches the issue, you cannot admit that there is a problem within Islam. You cannot admit that there is a problem within a tiny segment of Islam. You can't admit that there is a problem, period. And that's where we are. I think with things like Boston and the Canadian PhD bomber and more cells that are going to be broken up, in addition to one country after another falling like a set of dominoes in the Middle East, the American people will have a hard time reconciling the reality that they see on television and in print with some of the rhetoric that's on MSNBC and CNN and wherever.
Yeah, this.
Let me add to.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's important to understand that the elements in America of the Muslim community that the Southern Poverty Law Center has chosen to involve themselves with are in fact extremist elements.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent point.
They've gone over to the extremist side rather than reaching out to the Muslim community that rejects these things like Islamic jihad and Sharia. They've gone with organizations that we know are tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's been proven in court. If you want to if you want to go down that line, we can talk about the Holy Land Foundation trial. But these organizations are known to be connected to Muslim Brotherhood, and that's who SPLC deals with.
All right, this is the segue now. I wanted to lay a groundwork, a historic and philosophical groundwork, to establish the fact that we're fighting something that is akin to, similar to the communist threat in the Cold War, where there's a global totalitarian ideology. This one's infused with religion, which exacerbates the serious consequences. But now let's bring in the Southern Poverty Law Center, and in our analysis of all of their hate listings, as you just said, General, and CJ has a question for both of you guys. You can't find any of the organizations that the federal government has viewed as co-conspirators in the largest terrorism funding trial in the history of America. You can't find any of these organizations listed anywhere on their material. CJ, you had a question for the guys.
I'm just wondering, taking it to SPLC, this is supposed to be a civil rights organization, and really what they're doing is they're trying to silence any opposition to the leftist agenda. Really what they're trying to do is shut down free speech in America, which is kind of ironic for a civil rights group. Yeah. But they've aligned themselves with the Muslim Brotherhood in America, and this is a group of Sharia compliant people. The SPLC has a radical homosexual agenda. How do you reconcile a radical homosexual agenda and Sharia compliance that executes people for being homosexuals? How do their donors, how do their leadership at the SPLC reconcile these two viewpoints? How did that come together?
Well, you don't reconcile it. This is about money. This is about raising money for the SPLC. They will jump on any leftist, liberal cause regardless of the impact that it has on the nation's security or on the family structure in America, if it's an opportunity for them to raise money, they will jump on this, and they have found it convenient and expedient to align themselves with the radical elements of the Islamic community in America, that being namely the Muslim Brotherhood and its front groups, like the Council of American Islamic Relations and the Islamic Society of North America. And oh, by the way, that's not my assessment. That's the assessment of the trial in 2008 in Dallas, Texas, that we just talked about,
Right.
where they were named as unindicted co-conspirators. So this is about raising money, and I would invite Dave to contribute to my commentary.
Right. But I would also ask, as a quick follow-up to that, what do they need all the money for? What are they using it for? I mean, so far, really, all we found is they're putting a lot of money into this
To a hedge fund.
into this tolerance program. They're putting a lot of money into this school education for pro-homosexual
They're doing a lot there.
values.
If
So I
there's
don't,
one article I can recommend, and anyone listening to this, and of course you guys on the line need to read, is a piece in the Weekly Standard by Charlotte Allen.
Right.
In regards to SPLC, and there's just she goes through the history of this organization and how both the goals and the working methods completely changed around the early 80s. And not many people know that most of its legal staff walked out in the early 80s because the mission seemed to have changed, because SPLC, because Potok and Morris Dees, I believe it was just Morris Dees at this time, was not interested in actually the Southern poverty law
Right.
part of things.
Right.
He was interested in making money through direct mail. He was awarded. He was put into the Direct Mail Hall of Fame, actually,
Which he probably founded.
right behind some insurance salesmen. So the general's absolutely right. This is all about money. How do some of these different agendas come together? Well, I think they come together in terms of the fact that, I mean, let's be honest, these people hate conservative Americans more than they hate anyone else.
Okay,
And
thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
sure, I mean, there's nothing more apparent, especially after, I mean, in the wake of the Boston bombings, you need no more evidence for this. David Serrata at Slate, I'm sorry, Salon, who wrote the piece,
Right.
saying, "Man, I wish it was a white guy."
Uh-huh.
The bomber. I mean, they, in addition to wanting to use this as a weapon to further their political agenda, they just there's an element of pathological hatred of, let's say, 50% or more of this country,
Right.
and it's a kind of uncomfortable thing to think about. But at this point, there's really nothing else that would fit the bill as an explanation.
I think this sounds a lot like what we saw, at the beginning of George W. Bush's term. I mean, really, we had Bush derangement syndrome taking over this country, and I think the Bush derangement syndrome has kind of morphed into just such a powerful hatred against really white conservatives in this country, and certainly no tolerance at all for black conservatives.
I think that's part of the philosophical part, but
Yeah.
the underlying here is Morris Dees' desire. He's got a machine. He's got a phenomenal business.
Yeah, he's
But
got a $60 million house.
For
too.
every, does he?
Something like that.
Well, we have Charlotte Allen on part 4 tomorrow, so we will get all of that. This is Tom Trento, CJ. We're hosting TrentoVision, and today's part 3 of our special investigative expose into the Southern Filthy Rich Law Center, Southern Poverty Law Center. And we're with Dave Reaboi from Center for Security Policy and General Jerry Boykin from Family Research Council. And we've heard the Family Research Council story several times now. It's in part 1, part 2, regarding the attack by a homosexual activist, Floyd Corkins, against the employees. And as I said before, but for the grace of God and the courage of Leo Johnson, this could have been an unbelievable tragedy.
It would have been a massacre.
Could have been, absolutely. But the key right now, gentlemen, I think we've laid out quite a bit of the global desire for Islamic jihad to fight kinetically, and the general's been involved in that battle with weapons. And then we see the Muslim Brotherhood desiring to infiltrate a culture, not with weapons like Al-Qaeda might want to do, but with political influence, institutional influence, academic influence, buying chairs at Harvard, buying chairs at Georgetown. And now we seem to have we have an administration that is collaborating with and has been infiltrated with the Muslim Brotherhood leadership. General Boykin, SPLC now it works in partnership with the USG, the United States government, an entity that you took an oath years ago to defend its constitution. How do you reconcile the SPLC providing guidance to our law enforcement, intelligence, and military entities?
Yeah, well, don't ask me to reconcile that. You're talking to the wrong guy. Listen, Tom, your point is so important. Think about this. On the 6th of February, Floyd Lee Corkins pled guilty to 3 charges in a federal court in Washington, D.C. One of those charges was domestic terrorism. Now, as you said, we know that there is a connection between the Justice Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and now even the Department of Defense, and we can go into that separately. But they are connected because our government is allowing the SPLC, not only allowing, but helping SPLC to teach tolerance classes and to influence our law enforcement officers, as well as, and this is the other part of it, go into our school systems to teach the same thing. So they have a connection to the current administration. Now, they have been connected to domestic terrorism in a federal court as of the 6th of February of this year. Let's see how long this administration is going to continue helping these people and encouraging them and inviting them to be involved with our law enforcement as well as our educational systems. You see, what should happen is the moment that Floyd Lee Corkins was found guilty of domestic terrorism, the government should have distanced itself from the Southern Poverty Law Center because they're now connected to domestic terrorism. But thus far, that hasn't happened, and there seems to be no indication that it will. And furthermore, the United States media, the mainstream media, as soon as the bombing occurred up in Boston, they immediately got Mark Potok on and asked him who it could have been and what were his assessments. And Potok opined in a roundabout way that it was probably some of these right-wing patriot groups or the Tea Parties or something like that. And Tom, I know that you're aware of just how dangerous this kind of thing is, because there's a very good article about the impact that they had on an investigation down in Texas where a district attorney, an assistant district attorney, was killed, and his boss, the district attorney, identified who the killer was immediately, the same day of the killing. Yet, Southern Poverty Law Center came in and told the investigators this is the Aryan nations. Wow. For 10 weeks, the investigators pursued the Aryan nations, and in that 10-week period, the DA himself and his wife were killed. And it turned out to be exactly the guy that the DA identified on the day of the first killing. Wow. This is reckless. This is dangerous. Why do these people have so much influence in our media? Well, that's because they have influence in our government and because our government is supporting them. We've got to put a stop to this. People have to come out and make a statement that this cannot stand, because it is very, very dangerous and very damaging, as you saw here on the 15th of August at the Family Research Council.
All right,
And-
speaking of the 15th of August, I'm putting up on the screen right now, Mike, if you can put that up. We got a picture of Floyd Lee Corkins being handcuffed and taken out of the building, Family Research Council's building. And if I'm not mistaken, General, you were inside that day, correct?
I was. I reached the lobby about 2 minutes after it happened.
So you were a target of this guy. This guy intended on killing you. Make the
Sure.
connection. Dave, I want to bring you in, but before we do that, make the connection for the audience, General, to, now Floyd Lee Corkins is a homosexual activist, but he committed an act of terrorism according to the law in the District of Columbia. And make the connection to SPLC there that you've alluded to. How is that connection? And this could be an Achilles to this organization, SPLC.
A video will be released tomorrow, very broadly, and in that video you will actually see Floyd Lee Corkins during his interrogation by the Metro Police admit that he targeted the Family Research Council and 2 other organizations because of our stance on traditional marriage. He targeted us because we were listed as hate groups on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website.
Wow. That's released tomorrow. Okay, that's going to be, what, the 25th of April? We're looking forward to seeing that. We'll see if we can get some of that on our show. Dave, you had a thought you wanted to bring in. Dave.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Yeah, you had a thought before I interrupted you. You had a thought before you wanted to bring in regarding the connection of terrorism and Floyd Corkins and SPLC.
Right. Well, I was going to address another point, which is why the media seems to embrace groups like SPLC, and I it goes back to my original point that it's like bringing a paid-for professional expert into a courtroom. They're basically telling that the SPLC and groups like it are mouthing the things that the media would love to be able to say themselves. So it has a patina. It has a patina of expertise to it because, you know, the Mark Potok has a title and they have a website, and they've been doing this for years and years, and it allows them to make a legitimate point and to bash conservatives. I mean, as a point of history, I always the way I view this group is if you go back to the 1930s, the Soviets had a rhetorical policy where they would lash out at everyone to their right, and of course, everyone to the right of the Soviets is just about everybody. And they had a term for anyone who was who was not pretty much the Soviet line on any given day, which was fascist and reactionary.
And cosmopolitan and
sorry?
Cosmopolitan.
Right. Well, they called everyone fascist and reactionary, and you know, today that word is hater, and the word hate has just completely, you know, it has a resonance in America today for many different reasons, but that's why they use it. They've kind of co-opted this word to mean anyone that doesn't accept a you know, frankly, far left agenda. But of course, they won't talk in detail about what this really is. Right. They'll just say, oh, this person, this group, this whatever opposes this agenda. It makes them by default a hater, right. And it's so crushing. I can't think of a thing that is more crushing to intelligent political discourse in America, and it's frankly crushing to the First Amendment. I mean, you have this group encouraging, you know, for all intents and purposes, encouraging someone to do something. I mean, what is their own view of groups like ours that speak about that speak about issues and the dangers of, let's say, Sharia or the Muslim Brotherhood, etc.? they say that our groups are dangerous because someone will take the next step, the next logical step, and commit an act of terrorism or crime or whatever. Well, they're doing precisely the same thing.
Exactly.
They're doing
on the record.
what
Exactly. Yeah. This is what came out right after the Boston bombings. Is immediately the headlines were Muslims fear backlash. This is before we even knew who did it. Immediately, that's the headline. You can't even talk about what happened. There was bombings of the Boston Marathon. You can't talk about it because it could be Muslims, and you can't say that it's Muslims, and Muslims fear a backlash if it is Muslims.
Yep. Hey, we're on TrentoVision.tv. We're winding down. It's getting close to 6 o'clock on a beautiful Wednesday, the 24th of April. We're with CJ here. Our two special guests are General Jerry Boykin, Executive Vice President of the Family Research Council, and Dave Reaboi, one of the research specialists over at Center for Security Policy. Our subject, Part 3 of our investigative expose of the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is the connection of the Southern Poverty Law Center with the cultural jihad, the cultural Islamic jihad, as articulated by the operational agents, the Muslim Brotherhood and their affiliates in the United States, and the close association of the SPLC with these folks. And we're also sort of deconstructing the philosophy of the SPLC, trying to figure out, what are they all about? And you can cut to the bottom of that saying they're a money-making machine. But we've got a few minutes left. CJ, you had a question.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to ask you guys each for what can a typical American citizen do? I mean, when I'm getting emails in this special we have, they're going, all right, Tom, who are these people? What do we do? I'm going to ask both of you to share some thoughts on that. But CJ, you had a question.
That's actually part of what I wanted to bring up. But also, General, earlier you said that the connection with the shooting at Family Research Council was a direct connection with domestic terror and the SPLC. But they have a prior connection with domestic terrorism, because isn't it Bill Ayers who developed their Teaching Tolerance in Schools program? And doesn't he have a major connection with President Obama and the Obama administration?
You mean the weatherman, Bill Ayers? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you guys...
what do you think about that triad?
Yeah, well, Bill Ayers, Weather Underground, taken to trial for blowing up federal buildings, and in one operation, I think his explosives went off a little prematurely and killed some of his own people. Taken to trial, exonerated on a technicality, made a statement, guilty as hell, free as a bird, what a great country.
Yep.
And that is exactly where Mr. Obama's political campaign began, was right in his living room.
Exactly.
So yes, he is connected with what he has done in terms of the school curriculum, school programs. So yeah, there's a connection that goes way back.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, just a few minutes left. If each of you can take a minute or so and kind of sum up your thoughts and share with the audience an action step, something that somebody can do, whether they can make a phone call or whatever. Your thoughts. If we want the
SPLC not to be influencing law enforcement and the federal government, how do we go about making that happen? Do we do it at the local level, at the federal level, congressional? How do we do that?
I'll give you about 3 things. 1, get in touch with your school board and make sure SPLC has no contact whatsoever. Get in touch with your local law enforcement. Make sure SPLC is not training your people. Finally, call your congressman, write him, and demand that Congress look into the activities, the reckless, dangerous activities. We're going to be asking for Congress to look into this and what they're doing and what it's leading to.
Sounds good.
Okay, 3 very clear steps. Dave, what do you have?
Those are really great suggestions. I would say for the average person, in addition to doing all that, which is absolutely called for and necessary, in our daily lives, we can feed back at this concept of what's known, what these groups push forward as hatred.
Yeah.
I don't think we should take being called haters by a group like this sitting down. We should challenge them on it. We should challenge them and know precisely where that mythical tripwire is that separates us from, not haters to haters, because they'll never go there. They will never go there. Right. They'll never open up the books and deal with really the methodology they use for assessing them. So we are political targets of theirs.
Yeah, Dave.
Yes.
Well, your point is humorous somewhat, because I've been fighting these ideological, cultural battles for many years, 30 years, whatever. And I have found a very bizarre development. 25 years ago in the marketplace, when you went out and you debated ideas, the left they'd show up. They'd show up and they'd articulate a coherent argument. Their premises and their conclusions were flawed, but they would be in the game, argue. When it was over, you shook hands, you disagreed, and you may be angry, all of that. But there was an ideological, a philosophical confrontation to determine what's true. What I'm finding today, when you engage against the hard left in particular, the SPLC kind of people, just the mere act of engaging from their point of view underscores their proposition that you're a hater.
Right.
How could you engage on these issues, and how could you be emphatic and passionate about your position? You're obviously a hater, and their dumb, low intelligent constituents all go, yep, and their heads bobble and wobble, yep, Trento's a hater, Boykin's a hater, Reaboi's a hater, Gaffney's a hater. That's what I'm finding.
And culturally in this country, we are so spooked about hurting anybody's feelings that we would actually rather put ourselves in physical danger, be killed by terrorists, or be killed by carjackers or muggers, because it's racist to profile threats against yourself. It's racist and Islamophobic to point out that there is Islamic jihad happening, and we're so damn scared to be called haters that we just shut up altogether.
I want these guys to weigh in, but last night, General and Dave, a friend of mine, a former police officer, 30 years, is now a security guard on a railway somewhere in the United States. He called me up 9-10 o'clock. He goes, "You're not going to believe what just happened." He spotted two guys that looked very, very suspicious with a drawing pad, and he took a great picture, sent me the picture of the guys. Mm-hmm. And this is a cop, right, for 30 years in a major metropolitan city, now doing this. And he contacted the FBI. They were kind of blowing him off, and he's going, what are you talking about? We got all this stuff going on. He had to convince the FBI to take his photo, and now he's concerned whether he followed the procedure for his company. He doesn't want to lose his job. I looked at the picture. I said, those are bad guys, man.
Hello.
You could see some stuff about them. In any event, that's the world we're in. Closing thoughts, gentlemen. Each of you, share whatever you want. You got about a minute each.
As Leo Johnson stood over Floyd Lee Corkins after having disarmed him with the one good arm he had left, a bullet hole in the other, he pointed the pistol at his head to shoot him. And Leo told us later God told him not to shoot Floyd Lee Corkins. But we're the hate group. Tell me how that could be.
Yeah, good point.
Good grief.
Dave?
That was very powerful. I would just say we need to keep going. We need to keep going without fear, because if we cower collectively, then I mean, I don't want to say something as kind of cliched as they win, but they win. and they win by imperiling all of our security. We talk about the difference between groups like SPLC and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is at first for the average listener kind of counterintuitive, but the more they dig into this, the more they realize, yes, there's something there.
Hey Dave, you're starting to break up a little bit. I'm gonna have to let you go now. Your signal's breaking up a little, but it worked pretty good, gentlemen, for the interview, and a couple of little rough spots, but it was such a compelling interview that we kept the Skype going so everyone can see what's going on. Thank you, General Jerry Boykin. Thank you, Dave Reaboi, for taking the time to share with America, with the world, really. The TrentoVision show goes all over the place.
Yeah.
Our radio hits
I want to keep following
thousands of
this
people.
with them.
Yeah, we will follow this with you, but let's say goodbye to Washington, D.C. right now. And the Skype got a little tough in there for a while.
Yeah, it was rough.
But our viewers are
They're
not
used to a little
Yeah.
roughness with
roughness
TrentoVision.
That was
But that wasn't us.
no, that was a weak Washington connection.
Yeah.
But again, the material was so compelling that we wanted to hang in to the last minute and not cut the interview short. Those are two guys are in the belly of the beast, Washington,
it's just
D.C.
absolutely amazing to me. When you look at these men and you look at their lives, you listen to what they have to say, and they're the enemy of the people?
Unbelievable. That's a good way of putting it.
I
could have traced Boykin's military history from the rescue of the Iranian hostages, through Black Hawk Down, through Pablo Escobar capturing him, through so many events in his life. He was shot with a .50 caliber round that went through his arm, almost blew his arm off. I mean, unbelievable stuff. And he is an ordained minister, Christian minister, and he has a ministry now. And I know the guy very well personally. Hate is the last thing in the world. He sacrificed 36 years of his life for the United States of America, and he's continuing that. But this is the scam that's going on, and this is the battle we have to fight and expose SPLC.
Yeah.
So what do we have? Just a few seconds left there, timekeeper. Top of the hour, getting close to 6 o'clock. Is that 1 minute? We have 1
minute. Wrap it up.
left.
Tell us what's coming up tomorrow.
Tomorrow, you heard Dave Reaboi talk about Charlotte Allen, and she is the scheduled guest. Now, you never know what happens in Washington. You get called to a
Anything
meeting.
can happen, yeah.
She's an expert on SPLC
Yeah.
organizationally, but also their finances.
Yeah, I know.
How the
Did
hell
read
did
that
they get
article.
$250
Yeah.
million?
Yeah.
We're going to find out about that.
Follow the money.
And your point was well taken. What are they? Why
What
did
do they
they do
need the money?
anything?
What are they using
they
it
could all
for?
retire. So
Yeah.
Your thoughts? You want to close this out?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for watching part 1, 2, and 3. Please continue, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye bye, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
It's a wrap.